Welcome to Founder Rising, the podcast for women founders in wellness coaching and consulting who are ready to build businesses that create freedom, impact, and income. I'm your host, Christine Hakkola, business coach, former psychotherapist, and mentor to women scaling service-based businesses. Today, I'm joined by Alison Campbell, founder of Unburnt, based in the greater Boston area, Massachusetts. She helps leaders and organizations reduce burnout and build healthier, more effective teams through leadership development programs. Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. Let's just dive right in. So rewind a little bit to before you opened your own business. What was going on in your life and career when you realized that you couldn't operate at the pace that you were and wanted to create this company now called Unburnt?
Yes. So I won't do a full rewind, but the quick sort of summary is coming off of nearly 20 years of corporate experience, sort of navigating my way through finance, e-commerce, HR tech.
Wow.
I really enjoyed building my career. You know, there were tons of highlights, tons of moments of, pride. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, not dissimilar to probably many of your listeners and folks around the world, going through the pandemic as a mother of 2 young children with a very high pressure job and still trying to keep the plate spinning, at work and at home was incredibly stressful. But I think that what I didn't quite clock at the time was all of the exhaustion, pressure, stress that I was normalizing. And that I was onboarding and just sort of casting aside, saying, this is the price of entry, right? This is what it is, being a busy working mom. You layer on a global pandemic. I was trying to show up and be strong for my team at work, trying to ensure that business operations were running smoothly, up super early before the kids, woke up, homeschooling them, helping my first grader figure out how to type and log on to her Zoom classroom. It was a lot. And I think that the experience of normalizing all of the stress, pressure, and as I share very openly, ignoring a lot of the health warning signs compounded. And so over a period of months, I was really not feeling well. I was having stomach aches, lots of foggy thinking, walking around, just sort of feeling like I was on autopilot. Yeah. Until I sort of hit the wall and I ended up in the emergency room with really bad stomach pain. I was told I had to have surgery. And so that was a really big, of course, wake-up call that this had become completely unsustainable, now affecting my health. And so that was the moment that really changed it all. That, I had that existential take stock moment of...
And was that related to burnout? I mean, we don't have to get into all the medical parts, but how do you conceptualize that?
Yeah, I think that a couple of things. I think absolutely stress related, and at the same time, because I had been ignoring the warning signs and pushing through anyway and saying, I'll take a break after the next board meeting. I'll try to unplug the next time I take a day of PTO. Also was a little bit of a driver of sort of letting it get to the point of having to go to the emergency room.
Yeah. You mentioned the pandemic being kind of like I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like whether it was a turning point, it sounds like it maybe kind of expedited or like put you in a pressure cooker in a certain way. And I'm curious, like looking back now, what role you feel your experience during the pandemic played and if things would have turned out differently if we hadn't lived through a pandemic.
Yeah, it's such a great question, right? Because we can't A/B test life.
You never know.
And so I would say that I probably would have gotten to this point anyway. That said, it probably also accelerated that moment of reckoning. I was, as I mentioned, traveling globally. I'm back on a plane early 2021. Having to COVID test to get back in the country, right? Very stressful to think, oh my gosh, what if I can't get home? Or I have to be quarantined for 14 days in a place unexpectedly. And so those additional layers of pressure, as I mentioned, certainly I think expedited the whole wake-up call moment. But I also think that it was an eye-opening experience for many working parents, caregivers, folks that we had to all of a sudden figure out how to balance the very real realities of maintaining our professional lives, and then all of a sudden the infrastructure of care was sort of ripped out from underneath us. And so we were also balancing all of the demands of raising our kids and schooling them, as I mentioned. I mentioned my first grader, my 3-year-old at the time, his daycare closed for 6 months. So he was home with us, hanging out, right? And so absolutely. But the other piece that I think is really important to mention, I felt an enormous amount of gratitude at the time that we were able to hunker down. My husband and I both had roles where we could plug in and work fully remotely. And so I also felt not only that relief, gratitude, but I also felt the sense of responsibility that not everybody had that opportunity. And so I think that also probably expedited a little bit of you're lucky to be able to do it this way. And so perhaps ignoring some of the warning signs that otherwise might have been more obvious.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And I've spoken to so many female service providers, about a variety of things, but I can't count the number of times that the pandemic comes up as a pivotal turning point. And obviously everyone's experience is really different, but the threads and the similarities that I hear time and time again are about it being a wake-up call of sorts, and things that we were tolerating before, got compounded, like that sense of a pressure cooker, things being expedited. Yes. I think happened for a lot of people, myself included, where the ways that we were managing before suddenly weren't tenable anymore. And just that extra added stress and extra things we had to juggle, whether it was working from home or homeschooling young children or even older children at the same time, just became too much. And I hear time and time again, folks really taking a step back and going, what's important to me here? And what do I really want? And I've met a lot of people, and I did as well, and it sounds like you did too, that made some really big changes as a result of that. Things that obviously there were things that were so hard and awful and devastating about that. And I hear so many stories of people making choices that have led them in an even better direction. Absolutely. Can you say a little bit more about what was that like for you from a business perspective, shifting away from corporate and starting up your business? What was that first 6 to 18 months like?
Oh my goodness. So wild. I think a wild journey. So look, I'll say that the very first piece that I think is important to also acknowledge, when I left my corporate role, I had a seat at that executive table, right? I was really proud of the work that I had done to get to that place. And so recognizing that it had become unsustainable, and at the same time, sort of choosing, let me take some time to recover physically from surgery, mentally, emotionally from the past few years. Yeah. There was a lot of grief wrapped up in choosing to leave, saying goodbye to colleagues that I really trusted, admired, respected, and this feeling of almost identity crisis. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you've released a whole identity.
Right. I remember those very early days, sort of picking up my phone and then realizing, well, nobody needs me right now. And so it took some unwinding. Yeah. And even just from a sense of getting back to baseline, sort of unwinding the burnout and that pace that I had been so tightly wrapped around, took some time.
Yeah.
But what became very clear was, again, the stories, the experiences that folks started to feel really safe to share with me, because I had started to really unpack what I had gone through. And I think for so long had been keeping that veneer of smiling through it and sort of masking a lot of what was really going on underneath the surface. And once that mask came off, I think that really gave permission for other people to say, oh my gosh, me too. Or this experience happened to my sister-in-law. Yeah. And so it was that anecdotal feedback, as you mentioned, from other people starting to really, that light bulb was going off that this is very universal. Like, this is a very common experience in that it was tough before. Yeah. It's even tougher now. Yeah. Workplaces are trying to figure out, what does the future look like, right? We're in this moment of, what does a hybrid workplace look and feel like? How does it operate? And then starting to see the signs of how AI was transforming not just roles, but the flow of work. Yeah. There were a lot of inputs that were leading to additional, I'll say chaos for lack of a better word, as we were all trying to figure out, 2022, 2023, what the future would look like. And so those early days, weeks, months were really experimental. It was very much about having a hunch that there was something here at the intersection of helping people build personal capacity alongside leadership development trainings, offsite experiences that gave permission to look at the way we were operating, the way a team was normalizing cultural touch points within the business in a way that really supported both overall well-being, but improved performance. So again, very much experimental in just trying to talk to lots of leaders and initially bring frameworks to these businesses early on that I thought could potentially prove value, but it was very iterative.
Yeah. One piece you mentioned that I really want to touch on is you mentioned, the personal relationships and how when you kind of, I can't remember the analogy you used, but the image I got in my mind is you kind of like peeling back this layer and getting in touch with what was really underneath, what was going on for you. And I hear from so many women business owners that is so crucial especially in the early days of growing their business, that so much of it is built on personal relationships. And as you said, having those conversations, figuring out what was going on for people. What was the point in the earlier days of your business when you realized, like, you started getting some traction and you realized, like, I've really got something here? Like, what was there a turning point, or what was that part like?
I think, there were moments, there were glimmers, right? Because early on in starting any new business, you have days where you're riding high, and then you have moments where you think, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Did I make a huge mistake? And so absolutely early on, you look for those glimmers. But I think the traction, I started to really feel it building when I was going to networking events in Boston, or, inside a week I had 2 engagements where I felt like, all right, things are starting to compound. And the realization that, yes, we collectively as a society, we're all through something and we're still trying to figure out what the future looks like. I think the moments of, again, those glimmers were around starting to have similar language within conversations across companies, at events, where it felt like, okay, we're starting to normalize these conversations rather than folks feeling like I'm suffering in silence. I have to kind of white knuckle it to get through the week. It felt like even the permission to start naming some of the challenges initially was a big win. Yeah. How did you, coming from many, many years in corporate and then stepping into your own business, that's a huge shift, especially with, sounds like 2 little ones at home, living through the pandemic. You had a lot going on, and you had experienced burnout and a medical crisis yourself. How did you, as a new business owner, find that balance between building your business, but also protecting your own capacity and taking steps to try to prevent, that kind of experience from happening again? Absolutely. Such a great question. I think it's very top of mind. I think I joke a lot with my husband and with close friends and family that wouldn't it be ironic if I burnt out building Unburnt? So, it's kind of this, this running joke that we have, but it is very top of mind because I lived it and I experienced the struggle of what it feels like to be walking around on autopilot, not super present, not feeling well, and feeling every single day like I'm just so overwhelmed. So I really don't want to get back to that place personally.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much through this experience. So initially, the research I was doing to put myself back together, right? And then in all that I've done now in building Unburnt, meeting with clients, meeting leaders who go through a transformation themselves, has really reinforced for me that this works and it is possible. So for me, it really comes back to the sort of non-negotiables that I layer into my week. With grace, right? Because some weeks are busier than others. Some weeks I don't get all of my runs in. I'm not able to have the perfect bookends to my day. And so that's okay. Where I used to beat myself up and feel like, oh my gosh, you're not working out. It became a little bit of almost a shame spiral. Now I just on a weekly basis have a reset, right? I say, all right, this week got off track. Let me look out the next couple of weeks and see how I can layer back in blocks for recovery.
Yeah.
And I know that even on the days where I have that block and I'm feeling tired, I put my sneakers on anyway, and I sort of, I know that's easier said than done. I just push through because I say, even if I get a 10-minute walk in, that is better than zero. And I know I'm going to feel better on the other side, right? So I have the benefit now of building the habit of seeing what happens, how much more energy I have when I honor the commitments to build back capacity for myself.
Yeah, and you have the experience of having gone through it once and having, I am assuming, a pretty keen awareness of what led to that, and that kind of extra accountability of like, this is what you do for a living, is to support people to not get burnt out, right? So I imagine in some ironic way that accountability is actually helpful, and it sounds like
on the hook. Yes.
Before we keep going, I want to say something. If you're listening to this and thinking, oh, I'm in that season right now, I'd love to talk to you. FoundHer Rising isn't about polished success stories. It's about real growth, the hiring decisions, the revenue plateaus, the identity shifts that happen when your business starts stretching you. If you're building something meaningful in wellness, coaching, or consulting, and you're willing to have an honest conversation about what scaling actually looks like, apply to be a guest. The link's in the show notes. I'd love to meet you. Okay, back to the episode. What it sounds like is really working is self-care, giving yourself grace, right? And this is what you do. So I know you have a lot of techniques that you give to leaders in a corporate environment. What advice do you have for the female service provider who is, maybe 6 months or 1.5 years in to her new business, like feeling the pressure of working so that she can grow the business and earn money, but also keenly aware that she doesn't want to burn out? Like, what specific advice do you have for other female business owners?
Yeah, I think it is really hard, very, very difficult in those early months as you're building traction, quite literally wearing all of the hats. It always feels like, how is it Friday? I have 10 more things on my to-do list than what I had on Monday when the week started, right? So it's very real. I think that there are certain exercises, rituals, even just, again, normalizing the blocks for recovery, which can feel very counterintuitive when you think, oh my gosh, but I can't possibly stop because I have all of these things I have to get to. The reality is, and the research shows, we are not operating at our best, right? When we are trying to power through, when we're on the edge of burnout, even if it's just acute chronic stress, we're in survival mode, right? And so that impacts decision-making, our ability to sort of judge. All of a sudden now we're context switching because we're trying to just keep all the plates spinning. And so as a result,
work and
exactly. As a result, quality absolutely declines. And so tons of research that sort of bears it out. And I think when you live the experience of beginning to feel like, oh my gosh, I know I have to do this, but I just can't quite get started, and you're seeing the signs in yourself, it becomes very real and visceral. But I think we have to bake in moments of break, recovery, rest, whatever that looks like for you before crisis hits. So in meeting with any leader, it is very much about preventative, consistent, it's a way of working, a way of living, rather than I'm going to go really hard all quarter. We're just at the end of Q1 in 2026, collapse, regroup, and then do it all over again. It's just not effective.
It's not sustainable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I so get that. I was just speaking with a few of my clients the other day about this very thing, and it's like, we talk about this and everybody knows it. I'm imagining listeners hearing this going, yes, like we know this thing. And it sounds like for you, and my experience has also been that sometimes we need to go through it. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom and like really see the thing for ourselves to like really get it. And that's certainly been true for me. And I'm at a point now where I have, and what I was sharing with my clients is I have seen my productivity and what happens in my business and how I'm able to show up when I'm not taking care of myself. And granted, I might be working an additional 5 hours a week, but when I don't work those 5 hours a week and instead I go to the gym, I go for a walk, I talk with a friend, I do the things that I know nourish me, everything's better off. I actually work less, but I can see and feel how much more productive I am and how much better off everything around me is for having done that. And I think it's just sometimes like having those experiences to really anchor that in for ourselves, even though we know it.
Absolutely. And I think, some of it is mindset and how we've all been conditioned. And so I was just having a conversation with another female founder last week, talking about the feeling of imposter syndrome in going to the gym in the middle of the day. Like, am I allowed to be doing this? We all sort of came up in this lean in era of work really hard and you've got to grind through. And so to give ourselves permission to take an hour in the middle of the day feels really tricky.
Yeah.
The reality is we are in this infinite workday coined by Microsoft where you are quite literally always available and always plugged in. And so there are benefits, huge downsides. And so the workday looks different. It's no longer 9 to 5. So if that means you need to carve out time in the middle of the day or log off at 3 p.m. because you're noticing those triggers that it's just not productive, that's okay, right?
Yeah. Give yourself I think part.
Exactly. And so some of it just comes down to unlearning and sort of reconditioning ourselves to think about it differently.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great way to think about it. Let's shift gears and talk about your business. So I want to hear a little bit more about how your business has evolved from the services and offerings you maybe thought you were going to do or that you did in the first 6 to 18 months of your business, and how things look like now. How have your offerings and the way that you work with people evolved as your business has grown?
Yes, a lot. So initially, I thought that I would have some combination of coaching, leadership development, again, doing a range of different types of programs, but shorter engagements inside of organizations. And I also launched initially with a community. And so that was a really great experience. I found myself very early on feeling like I was building 3 different businesses. And so I really tried to sort of take stock and shore up and say my focus and what I really enjoy is going into organizations and leaning into team-wide engagements and being able to see the value, helping leaders sort of see the pre and post. And so while I really enjoyed the one-on-one coaching and I really loved the community, that was really hard to sort of pause.
Community
I decided
a lot of work to build.
Yes. I really decided to double down and lean into the B2B offering.
Yeah.
At the same time, it became very clear that a lot of the research around burnout first was pre-COVID. And the second piece was that a lot of the sort of measures of outcomes were tied to employee retention. And I just kept coming back to this question around, we know based on the research it impacts performance for all of the reasons we talked about. So individually, if we're not able to make quality decisions, do our best work, I was really interested to dig into how is that impacting team-wide performance? Like, is there some through line from friction in the work to burnout to ultimately how that impacts innovation and growth? Yeah. And so I set out to partner with Bentley University. I'm now an executive in residence there. And we've been doing this collaboration, this study, and year-long research around exactly that. And so we're just getting ready to launch a paper, which has reshaped a lot of how I'm building engagements now in 2026. Yeah. Because I'm able to look at, and together, we've got so many rich insights, looking at the drivers, again, of those stressors inside how the work is getting done, and then end-to-end how that actually connects to revenue, profit, innovation.
Oh, that's so exciting.
So, yes, and I think from just a leadership perspective, of course, we care about people being well, and that's really important. But it's also really important to tie it to the ROI of how engaging in this work is going to help the business as well.
Right. And I assume that a lot of the folks that you're speaking to, the leaders, they're the decision makers. And it's important from a marketing and sales perspective, but also from a holistic perspective, because we want to grow our businesses. We also want to do great work. We want the people we're serving to get the benefit. to tie those pieces together, because you're not just coming in and doing one thing. And certainly when we're serving, B2B, when we have a B2B offering, it can be really, really helpful for the leaders to understand how, yes, you're coming in to solve this one problem, but how solving that one problem ties into the greater ecosystem of the business.
Absolutely. And it's like any other decision. How am I prioritizing this thing over something else? Because resources are finite and time is limited as well. And so it all ties together very beautifully in terms of how the case is very clear as to why we're looking at one specific, right now at least, looking at one very specific vertical, but then it unlocks other potential within the business.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I want to connect some dots here, because what you're saying is showcasing something that I come up against a lot in speaking with female founders, especially who are early on and still looking to get traction with their business. I hear a lot about niching, right? And I hear female founders coming to me and they will say that they've received the advice that they need to pick a niche. And what I want to connect the dots on here is what you did, and what you did so skillfully, whether you were aware of it or not, that you started out doing a few different things, right? You didn't know quite what was going to catch, or you knew there was something there and you followed the threads of it, and you said you started out with 3 different offerings. I don't actually think that's a problem at the beginning, because when we don't quite know who we want to serve or where we're going to be most needed, where all those things intersect that really do make for a sustainable business, it's important to keep those doors open. Where I see it not go so well is we keep all the doors open for too long. We start to get busier. We try to do all the things. We can't grow 3 businesses at once. So there comes a point when we either need to niche just so that we can market more effectively, or in your case, you can't do all the things. You couldn't keep growing a community and doing your one-on-one and doing B2B. You're one person. So it sounds like you niched because very organically you realized where your interests lie, but also where you would have the biggest impact. And many times when I see business owners get that focused, whether they know that's happening or not, that's when possibilities really start to open up, because you found something that really meets a need, that people really want. And I know already that you're getting a lot of traction with what you're doing. What I'm curious about is, as you've shifted gears and focused in on this particular niche and audience, what are the pieces that you maybe didn't anticipate when you started that are like a learning edge for you? Some of the challenges specifically with growing your business in this way.
Yes, it's, I think when you start out, you need to, I kind of talk about it like casting a really wide net, so that you can get the signals, you can understand what people are resonating with, but also what's not working. Both from it's not working because people don't want it or need it, and maybe it's also not working because you don't like it. And so really important, as you mentioned, to kind of shed some of those early ideas. I think the trouble sometimes comes when we don't want to close any doors because we feel like we're so early, so we want to keep opportunity.
We're scared to lose clients, close opportunities.
And so having a number of lanes open helps us feel like we can hedge a bit. And look, early on, cash flow is important, and landing clients is really imperative, because you're trying to sustain and quite literally make sure you have traction to keep the business going.
It's not a terrible idea at the very beginning.
Yes. But as you mentioned, the focus is really important. So I think that was hard for me. It was really hard to close a couple doors and feel like, oh my goodness, am I limiting opportunity? Am I going to get too narrow? Are people going to think I'm only about, corporate workplace, future of work? Is that going to put me sort of in a box? The reality is, to your point, it opens up so many other opportunities.
Because that's the part I think a lot of people don't see.
Yes. So absolutely a growth edge for me, because it was tricky. And I had a lot of advice from mentors I really respect very early on, when they were starting to see sort of what was happening, telling me it was too much. And there was a little bit of resistance where I thought, no, I think I can do it all. Yes. And so earlier, the point we made about burnout, I think the same holds true for especially female founders who are trying to chart their own path. I mean, sometimes you have this moment of, well, I'm building my own playbook. And you kind of have to go through it because
Yeah.
if you listen to advice verbatim, you're never really teasing out there's a reason why this advice came from 5 people versus the pieces that you are truly, unlocking maybe for the very first time.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the advice specifically, that I give, that I hear, that folks have received, that sometimes we're resistant against is around hiring, is around automating certain things, advice that goes against do it all yourself and find ways to outsource that. And there's multiple ways to do that. What have been some of the hardest parts of both receiving and implementing some of that advice as you grow?
Yeah, I think some of it was the resistance piece that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
I think some of it has also come down to wanting to stay really close to every single piece,
Yes.
but also recognizing perhaps where I need to lean into my zone of genius or what makes it sort of the reason why I found it Unburnt versus the things sort of recognizing this just isn't my strength and being able to let go of a couple of things so that I can really lean into the parts that need my attention, need my focus.
Yeah. Well,
that's hard to do.
It absolutely is because, you mentioned something that we all, I think, experience is the resistance or hesitancy to let go of parts of our business because it's like, it's our baby. It's scary to trust, whether it's an AI or another team member. But the important piece that I want to highlight that you just said is even though we can do all the things, doing the things that are not in our zone of genius, that we don't enjoy, that we're not very skilled at, it takes time away from us doing the things that we are great at, which is typically serving our clients and staying in our zone of genius. So the real trade-off comes when we are willing to let those things go so we can do more of what actually grows the business and has a greater impact on folks.
Absolutely. And it's full circle in terms of just the burnout piece because the things that we know we sort of have to do, and look, in the beginning of building a business, you are doing all the things.
Yeah.
But what I realized was that the things that I knew I wasn't really great at or I didn't really enjoy were also really draining my energy. And so sometimes you have to do some of that stuff even as you are scaling the business. But if I look at the trade-off, it wasn't just opportunity costs of the things I am great at. It was also the drain on my energy and how present I could be in all of the other facets.
Exactly. So speaking of letting those things go so you can have greater impact, as you look to the future, what are some of the things that you're most excited about building, Alison?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So let's see. I am really excited for this new research coming. So we have our first paper that will be published early in April. Yeah. And on the heels of that, a number of different opportunities to present the research at a few summits and conferences. And I'm really looking forward to getting back to more in-person events. So whether that be with clients, I've actually, speaking of niching, have decided that while I'm absolutely fine to get on a plane, I also live in a wonderful city. Greater Boston has incredible companies. So I've spent a lot of time really focusing on the folks that are right here in my backyard because the value of getting in person and being on site is, with this work, really important. Yeah. And so looking forward to presenting the research, but then also cultivating relationships where, again, I can do that work in person. Not to say, again, I'm adverse of getting on a plane. And then I think getting to a place where there are some pieces that I'd like to start hiring for. And I'm hopeful that by the end of 2026, I can be in a place where I have a few more areas that I can bring in true experts and start to hand off so that I can really focus on the client engagement piece.
That's really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, sharing about your experience, just so openly. I think there's a lot of wisdom here in what we're talking about and what you've shared that I suspect is going to be very helpful. I also imagine that there are some listeners wanting to learn more about you and the work that you do, perhaps follow your research. If someone's wanting to get in touch, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was such a treat. If folks are interested to learn more, you can find out about Unburnt at getunburnt.com. That's my website. And you can find me on LinkedIn. So Alison Campbell on LinkedIn. That's the place I hang out the most and love meeting new people.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, listener, for tuning in to FoundHer Rising. If today's episode resonated with you, follow the show, share it with another founder, and leave a quick review. It helps more women find these conversations. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or learn more at HakkolaHorizons.com. Until next time, keep rising and keep building the business that gives you freedom to live, lead, and create on your terms.